Hi, this is David Gornoski, host of A Neighbor's Choice and Things Hidden podcast, as well as some of our other programs like Science and You with our chief science advisor, Dr. You, and our seed oil survival series that we continue to have great fun unpacking the truth of nutrition. I wanted to give you a quick little message saying we appreciate all the support that we get from our uh, monthly contributors and our one-time donation supporters. And we'd encourage all of you to go to our website, a neighborschoice.com, click on contribute, and make a monthly pledge today, whether it's $1, $5, 15, 20, 50, whatever you want to do. Doesn't matter. Just be a part of building this new media project that we've developed to empower and inform, to inspire, to kickstart a scientific renaissance, an anthropological breakthrough and reformation in the church. All these things are possible with your support right now. So make that commitment today and help us keep doing the productions that we have. Thank you. Well, today we're going to have an interesting discussion. Someone who I consider to be really trying to move the needle when it comes to apologetics and engaging culture as a Christian. He's John from the YouTube channel. What do you mean? Meme, how you doing?
Good, man. How are you?
Good. So tell me a little bit about where you got that name, the title for your channel, because it's been quite a success, it seems.
No, thank you. Yeah, so the name originally came because I when I was contemplating what kind of channel to do, this was back at the time when there was a lot of those picture memes that would pop up a lot on Facebook and stuff. And so I always thought I was like, I'd love to respond to a lot of those, but I knew that those memes wouldn't be around forever. So I figured I'd kind of would move that over to a lot of the, like the cultural type memes like slogans and these thoughts and ideas that pass on in culture. So I thought I'd just kind of respond to those. And so I kind of stuck with that name. What do you mean? But once after I started the channel, I found out that there was a game. It's like an X-rated game, I guess, called What Do You Meme? So that's why I changed the spelling to the weird spelling that I have now. So that way I
Okay.
can, yeah, keep it. So
Which one came first? Did they imitate you?
I think no, I think that they had it first. I didn't know though, but yeah. So I found out when I was already like 6 months or something like that into my channel. So it was pretty bad. I should have checked that first, but anyways.
Have you always been promoting kind of a Christian approach to culture analysis, or is that something that evolved down through the time?
That more evolved. It was initially it was a response to a lot of the atheists,
Yeah.
the online atheists when they were really big about 5 years ago or so, and that's about when I started. So I was responding to them, and then I knew I would eventually start drifting into culture more because I always had a bend for culture. So, but eventually I did move over to mostly culture rather than just engaging with atheism.
Very good. Now, a lot of folks have said, well, classical theistic arguments, apologetics, that's kind of passe too. That, the era of watching, William Lane Craig debate, someone like Christopher Hitchens, that was so 2000s. Is that
Right.
still something that is that a misunderstanding? Is that type of apologetic engagement still as strong as ever? I don't usually see clips of debates on college campuses like you used to.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I think that the mode is shifting a little bit. I do think that there's different types of people that are persuaded and interested in different types of things. But I'd say typical culture kind of moves into more discussions. So kind of like Jubilee or Joe Rogan or some of these, like I think typical culture today, I think they want to see discussions more than they want to hear debates. Because they're just that type of formal debate just isn't really fashionable right now. People really want to understand more than they want to debate, it seems like, in my opinion.
Mhm. And when you engage with your audience, have you noticed their demands from your channel evolving through the years, and the kind of expectations and requests that they communicate to you?
Um, Not so much. I mean, I do have some people that say that like, they miss my old stuff when I was responding to a lot of the atheist stuff. And I did skits and stuff for a while, so some people miss the skits, but not overall. Overall, it just kind of keeps moving. And I understand too. It's like people develop and they grow because I don't watch the same YouTube channels that I watched maybe 6 months ago, and so
Mhm.
some people develop and change. So I'm sure there's a lot of other content out there for them too. So I assume some people move on and then new people come in, and it's just always kind of a revolving door.
Now, how have you been able to succeed in YouTube when they've been become so censorious? You know, they've been so. We had a YouTube channel for our radio program that was deleted during the pandemic because of the final strike was first strike was we played the clip of Trump in the Rose Garden. Remember after the January 6th thing, and he was making his statement to his supporters, telling them to go home and don't be violent. And they didn't want that clip played anywhere
Mm,
because he had still echoed the statement that he had said earlier about his views on that election, and they gave
mm.
us a strike for that. They then the final strike was a caller just calling in and talking about concerns they had with some of the pandemic policies. How have you survived all that in the YouTube world?
Yeah, I don't know. I I haven't had any strikes, praise God for that. We'll see what happens in the future, but I haven't had any strikes. I try to respect their medium just because it's like the way I look at it is like if I get kicked off of it, then that takes away my voice there in this medium.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to abide by whatever rules that there are, even if I don't agree with them at all, and then just try to work around it because yeah, for me, I've always been kind of concerned with just making sure I can get that message out about the gospel, you know what I mean? So whatever I have to do that, like, I'm with that. So I try to personally be, and I'm saying this should be everybody's position. I think there are some people that do need to stand up against, some rules like this sometimes. But I think that's where it's goal oriented. So I thought about for myself, I said, what is my mission here? And then does this help me get to my mission if I take this action, or does it not? And so that's how I kind of thought about it during that time. But I did do a couple videos on it, but I was kind of cautious to just make sure not to try to flag anything in the system.
And the passion you have for the gospel, is that something you've had since you were a child and your upbringing, or is that something you came into later in life?
Definitely later. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely
Yeah.
later. So
Tell us a little bit about your story.
yeah, so to kind of keep a long story short, I wasn't raised in like a church going home or anything like that. And we never really talked about religion. And so it wasn't until I got older, kind of fast forward through a lot of stuff, where I took a philosophy of religion class. And then that's when I started, where I was convinced intellectually of God's existence. And so we went through all the arguments. They argued the positions for God's existence and against it, and then the responses and that sort of thing. And I found myself just convinced of God's existence. And so that was like my first step. And then after that, I started studying a lot on like the resurrection of Jesus, that sort of thing, and found myself persuaded by the evidence for the resurrection. So I really came in through apologetics, really philosophy of religion, but started engaging with a lot of apologetic material. And so when it comes to the gospel aspect, that kind of developed as I was going on with my channel. I was teaching apologetics locally out of the Reasonable Faith chapter here. And we had a guy come in that was challenging everybody on the gospel message. And that's where it really got me really thinking about the gospel a lot more and trying to make sense of it. And so I went through the whole New Testament, so really when it comes to the tension between faith and works and that sort of thing too. And so I went through the whole New Testament a couple of times. I wrote notes on the verses that seemed to imply works or entail works. Wrote an S next to the ones that seem to talk about salvation. Went through the New Testament again, argued, with other friends in different positions and stuff, and found myself just like naturally becoming surprised more and more by like the joy that I was starting to get just from really internalizing the gospel more deeply. And then I started seeing how the gospel applies to everything else in life. And then it started developing into this thing where I was like, this is such life-changing information. I want everybody to have this. And so that's when I started trying to package it into ways where I can talk about culture and things going on in the world, and trying to find ways to sew the gospel into it so people can see the practical reality of how the gospel practically impacts the way that you think and approach everything in life.
Yeah, that sounds a parallel to a thinker that we have really tried to help promote on our program, particularly on our podcast side of things. An anthropologist from Stanford named Rene Girard, and he had developed what became known as the Memetic Theory, and it most notably known for his elucidation of the gospel as revealing what he considered to be the framework, the social and cultural and psychological framework for society that human cultures up until the point of encountering God had been creating, which is he called it the scapegoat mechanism, where we have he said we didn't invent our gods, we deified our victims, and this notion of like we create human sacrifices as a way of kind of like offloading our guilt and shame into a common vessel of wrath and destruction as a way of kind of purging our sins out of our own, you know, shame. And so we don't tear each other apart in war of all against all human societies. Whether you look at the Aztecs or the ancient Germans or anybody, we're doing these types of patterns. And so he converted to Christianity through an intellectual journey first, right? I mean, he passed in 2015, but he came up in the era where it was very fashionable to not want to have any kind of meaning behind history. Everything was getting into the deconstruction mode and everything, but he fought against that grain and really established a really foundational framework that people have turned into a type of apologetics, because he said, look, I studied mythology and I studied literature, and it all pointed back to this same framework that the gospel is what penetrates all of it and kind of fulfills history. So I don't know. It just sounded interesting what you were saying there about how you came about it from an intellectual perspective rather than an emotional one at first, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Which is interesting because a lot of people tend to have it kind of the other way around, or they were born into it. So there's a lot of like little kind of disconnects sometimes I have, like even in church culture, since I didn't grow up in it. It still looks strange to me sometimes. You know what I mean? When I go to
Yeah.
church and there's certain language and stuff that, I wasn't raised on, and then you start kind of learning stuff. You start learning what kind of triggers people more and what doesn't, so it's just interesting just coming about it from a different angle a little bit, for better or worse, has its pros and cons. But
Yeah. Do you that recently had that movie, The Jesus Revolution, which talked about this kind of engagement with the hippie culture at the time of America? Do you see something like that being possible in our time today? And do you think that's something that we could experience in our lifetime in America, where we could have a kind of rekindling, an electric energy for rediscovering who Jesus really is?
That's a great question. I hope so. I want to try to maintain some degree of optimism, around this, because I do think that I think that so there's the good thing about there's good things and bad things about social media when it comes to how we think about Christianity. One of the downsides is that the algorithm really prefers people to be condescending and to tear people down and that sort of thing consistently, right? It's one of the better ways to kind of work the algorithm, because really it's just human nature. It's not necessarily even the algorithm. It's the fact that like humans like to be upset at things. We like to stand against things and be, ticked off. That's why memes worked in the first place, right? Because it was like the emotion that they would provoke, and so it would get people kind of going and passing these memes along to provoke other people and that sort of thing. So I am concerned with the way that Christian discourse overall, at least from what I see, I'm sure there's a whole side of YouTube that I'm not aware of, but I am concerned with the focus on kind of just like attacking, Christian. Really, it's the uncharitability that's more of the issue. Is like really kind of just like demonizing others for different views, and you know what I mean, that sort of thing, rather than engaging. Where I think a problem comes is where we close dialogue. So it's like we can disagree, but when it's like we're not going to talk to you, we're just going to demonize you. That's where there's a problem. So back to your question about Jesus Revolution, what that would look like today. I'm sure it's just kind of accepting people on the other side of the political aisle, whatever that looks like. I think that's how it would look today, because there's such a wall divide between the Democrats and the Republicans when it comes to Christianity. Like, they're both sides claim to be Christians, but both sides refuse to believe that the other side are actually true Christians.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that that's a chasm to try to cross, and I think it's difficult. I see why a lot of people don't do it, because it's difficult to bridge the gap because the divide is so great now. So it's like you have less in common with this side, or you think you do, or you think you don't have anything in common with that side. And so because of that, any sort of like validation they're afraid that it's going to look like you're approving of everything that they do. And then it's like you can't share any agreements with that side. They're the evil ones, you know? And so because of that, that demonization has just really polarized people so far that it makes that bridging that gap very difficult today.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw like a few months ago you had a video about Logan Paul, who's this YouTuber who was mocking Christianity. Is that kind of a test to what you were talking about? That's the what the algorithm tends to promote?
Yeah, yeah, it is. It is. It's like anything kind of negative like that, and that's why I'm always hesitant to say the algorithm because really it's humans that are driving the algorithm, right?
Yeah.
I mean, of course there might be something behind where, you know, sometimes people can pull some nicks and crannies, but for the most part, it's really what we're kind of drawn to. And I think Christians, a lot of times we're not aware of just how sneaky our flesh can get, you know? So it's like if we can justify something. It's like, oh yeah, we could be mean to these people because they're serving Satan or whatever. But in reality, it's like the gospel is the great neutralizer. It's like we're no better than they are. We're not any more qualified for salvation based off of our actions than they are. You know, and so it's like we have to be able to kind of bridge that divide and see that they're like us in that sense. Stress those similarities sometimes instead of always stressing the differences. So that way we can kind of bridge the gap more and be able to communicate and love them more by just even altering the way that we think about ourselves and them and salvation.
Yeah, you recently got into it with another guy who's on Rumble, Sneako, about his comments about Christianity with as it relates to Islam and why he converted to Islam. Um, why do you think people in our culture are being interested in things like Islam? Why are they? Why is there an up? Is there an uptick? It seems like I'm starting to see this percolate a little bit more. With you've got, I guess, Andrew Tate kind of made it a famous thing when
Yeah.
he made his conversion, and now other people are starting to kick the tires on Islam, so to speak, and say, is this the kind of machismo version of Christianity that I can take and be
Yeah.
cool still and be a strong, whatever that they're trying to go for?
Right. Yeah, no, that's a good question. I'm not sure about the statistics on this, but I do share your sentiment when it's like it does seem like there's more going on now ever since Andrew Tate kind of converted. And I think because of that, it's got a lot more people's attention. I think in the case of Sneako, of course, he's always kind of um, um, let's just say thought highly of Andrew Tate and like to kind of emulate a lot of Andrew Tate's thoughts and actions. And so because of that, I think that that definitely played a role to some degree. But I think that if there is an increase in Islam, I think that the reason why is going to be similar to the increase in some sorts of structured type religion. So like even Catholicism or the Anglican Church. Like I think people, because the world is so chaotic right now, because it's so postmodernized, where everybody's kind of feelings dictate everything and make it so extreme. Everything's just like, I like this. I mean, this is true because I think it's true for me. That's true for you. Because of that, all that stuff going on, people want some sort of structure and foundation and direction because they're starting to find that I believe that people are starting to find that their internal feelings aren't the best guide for how they should live life because it's leading to all these problems that they weren't aware of. And so because of that, I think people are looking for a lot more direction and structure in their lives. And I think that's where something like Islam could be appealing to somebody who might be there. But I think it's the same, going to be the same thing for a lot of the people now converting to like the Orthodox churches and Catholicism and those sorts of movements as well. So that would be my kind of initial take on it. I think there's more that could be said about it, but that's my kind of initial thoughts on it.
Do you think that there's a certain wing of these young folks who are converting to traditional religion who maybe they're not converting for the love of Christ, but rather for the love of structure and a kind of disciplinarian religion, and therefore might become more tempted to join Islam down the road on a sliding scale of, I want something to give me structure and discipline. It's like joining the
Yeah.
Marines or something.
Yeah, yeah, I think that there's definitely a pragmatic element to the way people are approaching religion as a whole today. And I think online we saw a lot of this, I think, initiate with Jordan Peterson. He was really influential into getting people to start considering Christianity. And he did that as a way of meeting people where they were because culture was already very pragmatic with saying, like, you want a religion that works for you or benefits you in some sense, not necessarily that it's true in an objective sense, but just that it works for you. And given that Jordan Peterson has a background as a psychologist, that's typically how he kind of sees the world. Typically, I mean, and you've interviewed him before. I think
Mhm.
I haven't seen the interview, but I'm sure you're aware he kind of views it from that kind of pragmatic angle. And so, because of that, I think it really kind of made other people see that, which was good because it was opening them up to Christianity and when they previously weren't. But the downside to that, I think, is that a lot of people see religion as just a pragmatic exercise rather than actually looking for something that's objectively true and binding on all people. And
Mhm.
so I think that caters into a lot of the people's choices, whatever their religious choices are. I think that that element is present in a lot of people today, from what I've seen.
What do you say to folks that say that Christianity is a coping mechanism for?
That's yeah, to me that's just if that's supposed to be name calling, okay. So I'd say that like, yeah, I think it could be. I don't think that's all it is, of course, you know what I mean? But sure, if it helps us cope through life, there's nothing wrong with that, but I just don't think that's all it is. I don't think you should believe in it because it can help you cope in life. I think that you should believe in it because it's true, first and foremost. And if it helps you cope in life, that's great. That's kind of how my experience was with the gospel. It's like I didn't approach it as a way of trying to feel better about anything or feel good about or anything like that. It was an intellectual pursuit first that I was convinced of, was true, and this is what the scriptures were teaching. And then after that, the emotions, I started developing more like seeing the emotional benefits of believing in it, because it helps, I believe, keep you kind of psychologically grounded in different ways, given where you place your identity in Christ and so on. So yeah, so that's my thoughts on it. I don't. If people want to say it's a coping mechanism, that's fine. I mean, it's counseling's a coping mechanism. Does that mean it's bad or wrong or dumb? No, So yeah.
What about why do you think there is such a disenchantment in the younger generations where they're too cynical to believe in anything, they're too cynical to be passionate about things. I mean, you have uh passion and charisma and excitement are seen as kind of like an ironic meme, to go back to that starting point. I'm thinking of like Alex Jones clips, how he goes really, fired up and he jumps up and down, and Generation Z and so forth, they look at that like, oh, isn't this cute that this is like a character, this is like a meme thing, as opposed to never being passionate. You can't be excited about life, you can't believe in anything great like curing cancer or anything big and bold. It's all just, well, who knows, it's just kind of wasting away on TikTok or whatever it is that people find themselves doing these days. There's no desire to like do anything big and bold and passionate. Where do you think that comes from?
Um, I'd have to kind of know more what you're referring to. I guess I would think that my initial kind of thought to that is it may not necessarily be that it's not allowed to be passionate and stuff like that, but instead we were told, at least for millennial generation, we were told that you'd find that passion and happiness and fulfillment by looking inside and then actualizing that into the world. And so when you do that, you're going to quickly find that that's not going to be liberating because humans, I think we're designed where we need to live for something greater than ourselves. That's why religion, I don't think, is ever going to go anywhere because people need to live for something greater than themselves. Now, they'll try to replace it with things like politics or some sort of movement or something like that. But I think that that's innate in all of us. And I think psychologically speaking, people are healthier when they have something like that to look towards, they're psychologically healthier. So I think that it could be a consequence of that we're seeing. I think that, yeah, I think that people are just told that true happiness is not out there, it's inside, and that's where you have to go to find it. And because that's kind of the dominant view, I think that's where more people are finding themselves less excited and happy because like how interesting is it to just like look inside and see what you like and then you know I mean that's kind of like the end of the road. It's not that exciting.
Yeah.
So I think it could be the other way around.
Do you think
Yeah.
that's the basis where the LGBTQ religion has become so dominant in our culture today?
I think
Yeah.
that's part of it. I think part of it, I think, is that people, whatever happened in culture, maybe this started with the sexual revolution. I'm sure there was precursors prior to that. I mean, even going back to say um, Kierkegaard, you know what I mean? But let's say like the 60s and stuff, you have the sexual revolution where people are, it's a response to what they consider to be sexual oppression for women. And then so we start there, and then we start saying, okay, we should celebrate these things like your sexuality, and you have the Hugh Hefner era and all that, like celebrate your sexuality. And then I think people started identifying as their sexual preferences. And so because of that, we entered into this world where people think that like their value and what makes them unique and special, and that's why they have value at all, is because they're part of this movement. And then I think cultures kind of reinforce that. And so with that, it's really kind of shut down even the dialogue between LGBT affirming and non-affirming people, because it for them it seems like if you're not affirming, then you're saying that they have no value, because again they believe this is what gives them value, even though they might not use that language. But the identity statement is what makes things kind of so difficult. So I think that that's part of it too. Is like people are looking to be validated. They're looking for identity, and they're looking for meaning and purpose, and so if that fulfills that for them, then it is going to be treated a lot more sacred.
Yeah. How does this not end up in the same boat as the battle over gay marriage in 2004, where, you
Right.
had this Republicans were making all these, they were passing all these state laws banning gay marriage, and it looked like it was the backlash against that movement trying to make that into law. And then right after that happened, it seemed like all the energy of the culture started shifting back into the hands of that movement to redefine marriage. That culminated eventually several years later with the Supreme Court decision. It seems like I feel like that same pattern is happening here with this new gender deconstruction for children, right? Where all of a sudden
Right.
it starts and everybody's kind of like, what's going on? And they catch up a little bit late. They kind of freak out. There's a big backlash. A few states start passing bills, and already we see federal courts ruling against, saying, that state law against this or that is invalidated. It seems like that seems to be the pattern here, is that they'll push the boundaries, and then the conservatives will react and freak out, and then they'll create a narrative that says, look, we're the victims here. We're, again, you guys are crushing us. You're hateful. And they seem to sway the normies in between that conversation. They kind of go either way. They seem to always win on that argument of, well, it looks like you guys are the hateful side, and we're going to go join Team Liberation. Seems to always kind of be the trend here. So how does that continue how do we stop that from happening all the time?
No, that's a lot of good questions there. So in my mind, of course, like, and you got to this towards the end too, is politics plays a role in this as well too. So as long as we have people who are the ones that are going to take a stronger stance, any side, the other political side, is going to take advantage of that, right? Because, and so it's about that pressing these pieces. They react to each other, and then it just the distance gets greater and greater and greater, and they have to get more and more extreme in order to kind of level up with social media and news and everything like that, right? And so that, I think, is a problem in and of itself, because we're losing the ability to communicate. And so I think of Paul in Acts 17 too, where Paul's talking to the Jews there. He's using a lot of scripture. When he's not talking to the Jews, he quotes no scripture, and so it's like we right there, what Paul is doing, he's trying to have middle ground there, so that way he can be able to talk to the different groups to persuade them. The problem comes in when we demonize the other groups so far that we can't even talk to them. They're the reason why the world is messed up. They're the reason for all the problems in the world, and that's how both sides think about each other. You know what I mean? And it's beyond politics, of course, too. Even sports teams can act this way, but I'd say that, like, I think what I've kind of seen in my time here on YouTube and covering stories and that sort of thing too, is both sides tend to really strawman the other side a lot, and they take these more fringe examples to make and to act as if they're representative of the whole side. And I think that what that does, again, is it continues to push the divide. Now, in terms of what we can do, I really think that we can work harder at this. Is where I think that the gospel, in my mind, to me, other people might have other solutions, but the gospel seems like such a good solution here, because it's a neutralizer. It's saying that we're the same things that cause you to do all the wicked things in the world. That same thing, the seed of that, which is sin, is inside all of us. You know what I mean? And so it's like we underestimate just how messed up we actually are. You know what I mean? No matter what side we're on any issue. And so the gospel can really humbly kind of pull us there so we can start seeing each other as more equal, you know what I mean? And all of us having the same needs, needing a savior, you know what I mean? And then how the ethics and stuff established in Christianity really helps to actually sort a lot of these issues out. Like you just take loving your neighbor, right? You know, this is your neighbor is not somebody that agrees with you, hold your same beliefs, views, and that sort of thing. No, in the Bible, when even when the disciples ask, "Who is our neighbor?" You know what who Jesus is pointing to is somebody, you know, a Samaritan, someone who's not like you, disagrees with you on everything, you know, religious, everything, a different culture. Those are your neighbors, and you love them as you love yourself. You know what I mean? And even your enemies, you love your enemies. So just taking those ethics, it can allow. At least we have the resources within Christianity to be able to say, okay, I understand they frustrate me, but what would happen if I treat them and love them the same way that I love myself? You know what I mean? And so with that, I think it's a solution. Outside of that, I genuinely don't know. I'm open to ideas, but I don't know. I think that today more than ever, I think we need the gospel to really kind of really infiltrate people's minds and how we kind of think about other people.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to the scapegoat theme we were talking about earlier, which is that when you blame somebody, or at least you create a narrative that makes it look like they're the worst of all, that will give them power in our culture. Because I say that our culture is Christ haunted, and whenever people perceive someone to be a target of scapegoating, it looks like they're a type of Christ, right? Even if what they're doing isn't really what Jesus would stand for, you can kind of create a martyr's energy for your
Yeah,
target. And we're
yeah,
so infected with Christian sensibility, even when we reject the metaphysics of Christianity, that we can't help but side on the side of the underdog in our kind of preferences.
you're
And I
right.
think,
Yeah,
I think that's why the leftist culture that tends to be generally against taking the claims of Christianity seriously on a metaphysical level, at least, they have been more effective in culture moving it forward, because they more effectively imitate the aesthetic of the gospel, of the martyr,
mm,
of the one who dies for the many. And you know, you look at the Summer of Love protests, right, and how they were able to take George Floyd and turn it into an icon that everybody wanted to be baptized right in the same steps, where right in the same part of the town in which he died, right? I mean, they know how
yeah.
to harness that victim power that the gospel unleashes, and they sometimes use it for ill, you know. But that is something the right tends to fall into that trap every time, of looking like the Roman soldiers rather than, you know, the side of Christ on those issues, you know.
Yeah, I think too, it's like which is unfortunate is the left does tend to emphasize empathy in their own way, of course, you know. And then but the right's response to that a lot is to come at it, you know, again with like facts don't care about your feelings, you know what I mean? That type of mindset,
Yeah.
and it makes them look even more non-empathetic, you know what I mean? And so because of that, it's just reactionary, you know what I mean? And so there's a lot of ping-ponging back and forth, reacting, and then it's like people don't typically hold these views as extreme as they present. But it's like they're just reacting to the other side so much, where it just makes it look more and more extreme. And then unfortunately, influencers are really influencing culture, you know? And so when we have people like, say, Don Lemon, and then you have Tucker Carlson, and then you have Matt Walsh, and then you have Charlemagne, you know, so you have all these people who are kind of reacting to each other on the different sides, and then it just gets more and more divided. And so it is scary though, because the divide is just it seems to kind of be only increasing. But I have seen an uptick of people who are just kind of sick of talking about. I mean, I'm sick of just this like, okay, we get it, yeah, we hate the other side, yeah, they're the problem, you know. And then people I think are become I hope at least people are becoming more aware that like whatever your favorite political person is saying, you know what already what he's going to say before you even know what he you know whatever the issue is. Like if I know if Brandon Tatum is covering something with say a black person getting shot, he's not going to take the side of the black guy, right? Because it doesn't really fit his narrative. And so like these are the type of things that you're going to see. And so it's like people have to realize that like this is a system, this is an algorithm, this is all of these things. They're preaching to their choir, so they're not going to be taking the objective stance on these things all the time, you know. And so if people become more and more aware of that, then I think people will be more distrusting of that as they were with institutions and stuff. You know, people have been more distrusting of institutions, and if that's the case, who knows what follows that? I have no idea, but we can see.
If we're Christians, we're called to be peacemakers, which means you have to figure
Yeah.
out how to resolve the crisis, not stoke it continually, you know. And
Yeah, as
I
much as
think
it depends on you. Yeah, have peace with all men, right?
so. As a YouTube influencer, what does success look like to you? You know, what do you want to see this in the long term? What your project turns into,
Yeah,
or looks like?
that's a great question. For me, I hope to honestly inspire and show other people that it's possible, to not have to necessarily like try to demonize everybody. Try to look at things more charitably, try to understand where they're coming from, and try to give responses that are honest and not just dismissive, you know. And one way, like, and honestly, like I was shocked that like a lot of the stuff I've done where I'm not being so, you know, one-sided on stuff. I was shocked that that stuff would actually work, but I believe that it was right. I believe that I was being faithful to the scriptures and stuff on these issues. And so, but it still has worked. So if it works for me, it can work for others, you know? And so I really hope to kind of encourage others to see that there's a different way. So that way we can change a lot of the landscape, because I really haven't, I don't think it's good the way that it's been going a lot lately, like attacking just everybody just for, you know, rage. It's like rage culture or whatever. It's just like you're just being outraged by everything. I don't think that's helpful, you know. So I'm like, so what's helpful? And so I'm trying to build some bridges in between that. um yeah, so in terms for success, like really just kind of doing that and just reaching people, more and more people with the gospel, you know. So reaching people in culture, people who never thought of the gospel in these different ways, never thought the gospel could be relevant to their lives, helping them see how it is relevant to their lives and it's what they've been looking for.
Well, very good, John. I really appreciate you coming on the show, and I want folks to check out, of course, your YouTube channel. What do you meme? Anything else you'd like to leave us with?
No, I think that's it. And I just appreciate you having me on, and thank you for your time and for the good questions.
Very good. Take care, and we'll continue to watch the show with interest.
Thank you.